All right, we're going to continue now. Bergson is giving us a little dialogue, and um, and he's talking about the parallelism, the assumption of parallelism between or identity between matter and mind, and he's described sort of the evolution or the progression of thought, I guess you could say, from Descartes to Spinoza and Leibniz, and then to thinkers of the 19th century, materialist philosophers of the 19th century. And he says that if any of these scientists should any of them come and tell us they are actually talking science, that it is experience that reveals a strict and complete parallelism between the cerebral and mental life. Ah, no, we reply. Undoubtedly, you can hold this theory as the metaphysician holds it, but then it is no longer the scientist in you who speaks, it is the metaphysician. You are simply returning to what we have lent you. We philosophers are well acquainted with the doctrine you are offering us. It comes from our workshops. It is we philosophers who have made it. It is old, very old ware. It is not, indeed, worth less on that account, but it is not worth more. Give it to us, give it to us for what it is, and do not pass off as a result of science, as a theory modeled on facts capable of being remodeled on them, a doctrine which had taken, even before the dawn of our physiology and psychology, the perfect and definitive form which reveals a metaphysical construction. So it says, don't try to call metaphysics science, because experience did not reveal a strict parallelism in a scientific way. This is a metaphysical theory that we've lent you, that philosophers have lent to scientists, even before psychology and physiology came along. Just getting them to realize that it's not worth less because of that, but it's not worth more either. And then he says, let me try then to formulate the relation. Oh wait, this is Bergson speaking as a writer now again. Let me try then to formulate the relation of mental to cerebral activity, such as it appears when we set aside every preconceived idea in order to take account of only actually known facts. A formula of this kind, not necessarily provisional, can only claim more or less probability. But at least the probability will be susceptible of growing greater. Now, so in geometry, and just as an aside, in geometry and physics, you can have more or less, for all practical purposes, you can have definite knowledge, because matter is one thing. But with the mind, when it comes to the mind, he says, the formula of the relation between the mental and cerebral activity, such as it appears when we set aside every preconceived idea in order to take account of only actually known facts. A formula of this kind, necessarily provisional, temporary, can only claim more or less probability, not definiteness. Now, but at least the probability will be susceptible of growing greater, the formula of becoming more and more exact, in proportion as the knowledge of the facts grows wider. Now, a close examination, so we're saying that for practical purposes, a really high degree of probability, which is the best you're going to get with a mind science, can amount to a practical certainty, which is what we should be striving for in terms of mind sciences. We shouldn't model our mind sciences on the physical sciences, because they're something different. But this is all yet to be proved. This is what the facts suggest, at least. So here we go. A close examination of the life of the mind and of its physiological accompaniment leads me to believe that common sense is right, and that there is infinitely more in a human consciousness than in the corresponding brain. Thus, in general, is the conclusion to which I have come. For the detailed argument which has led me to this conclusion, I must refer to Matter and Memory. I'm trying to find the book. I don't know. He's saying that if you want to know the full story on this, you're going to have to read his incredible book, Matter and Memory. Principally, the second and third chapters. It seems to me that were one able to look inside a brain in its full activity, follow the going and coming of the atoms and interpret all they were doing, he would doubtless know something of what was going on in the mind, but he would know very little. He would know so much of the state of the soul as can be expressed in bodily gestures and attitudes and movements. He would know all that it implies in the way of actions in the course of accomplishment or simply nascent, or beginning. The rest, however, would escape him. As regards the thoughts and feelings which were being unrolled within the consciousness, he would be in the situation of a spectator seeing distinctly all that the actors were doing on stage, but not hearing a word of what they were actually saying. Certainly, the movements of the actors, their gestures and attitudes, have their ground in the play they are acting. And if we know the text, we can in some measure foresee the gesture. But the reverse is not true. Knowledge of the gestures on stage by the actors, knowledge of the gestures tells us very little of the play, for there is much more in a play than the pantomime of the players. So I believe if our science of cerebral mechanism were perfect, and our psychology also perfect, we should be able to divine what is happening in the brain during a definite state of mind. But I equally believe that the reverse would be impossible, since for one single condition of the brain we should have the choice of a host of equally appropriate states of mind. So he says that he's saying that if we knew everything that was going on in the brain, we would. Oh, it says that if our science of cerebral mechanism were perfect and our psychology also perfect, we should be able to divine what is happening in the brain during a definite state of mind. But I equally believe that the reverse would be impossible, since the one single condition of the brain we should have the choice of for one single condition of the brain we should have the choice of a host of equally appropriate states of mind. Note that I do not say that any state of mind can correspond to a given cerebral state. Suppose you have a frame. You cannot place any picture in it. The frame determines something of the picture by eliminating beforehand all which have not the same shape and size. But provided it is correct in these respects, the picture will fit the frame. So also with the brain and consciousness. Provided the comparatively simple actions of gestures and attitudes and movements in which a complex mental state would be materialized are such as the brain as the brain is ready for, the mental state will insert itself exactly into the cerebral state like a picture into a frame. But there are a multitude of different pictures which would fit the same frame equally well. Consequently, the brain does not determine thought, and, at least to a large extent, thought is independent of the brain. The study of the facts will enable us to describe with increasing accuracy the particular aspect of mental life which alone, in my opinion, is delineated in cerebral activity. Now, is the mental fact our faculty of perceiving and feeling? Our body, inserted in the material world, receives stimulations to which it must respond by appropriate movements. So perception and action. The brain, and indeed the cerebrospinal system in general, is concerned with these movements. It holds the body ready for them, but perception itself is a wholly different thing. Is it our faculty of willing? The body carries out voluntary movements by means of certain mechanisms set up in the nervous system and waiting only for a signal to start them. The brain is the point where the signal is given and also where the mechanism is operated. Now, the Rolandic zone, where voluntary movement has been localized, is in the brain, is in fact comparable to a signal box from which the signalman shunts the comparing train to its proper line. Right. I think we're going to skip some of this in the next video.